You clicked because something swallowed a great white shark whole, and I need you to understand that I came to this story to laugh at it. A 9-foot apex predator, gone, eaten, vanished into a stomach larger than itself. That is the conclusion I am going to defend to you tonight. I expected a glitch, a flooded sensor, a hoax dressed up for a documentary. What reopened the case was a single satellite tag that washed back onto an Australian beach 4 months later, still holding its data. There is a temperature reading on that tag, recorded at 580 meters down, that I could not explain away no matter how hard I tried. I will give you every reasonable explanation tonight. You will watch each one fall. Let me tell you exactly what I was looking at when I stopped feeling clever. In 2003, off the coast of Bremer Bay in Western Australia, a research team fitted a healthy great white shark with what is called a pop-up satellite archival tag. The animal was roughly 3 meters long. That is a fully grown subadult, a creature that fears almost nothing in the ocean. The tag is designed to do something simple. It rides on the shark, recording depth, water temperature, and light levels for months. Then, on a preset date, it releases, floats to the surface, and beams its log up to a satellite. Clean science, boring science, even the kind of thing nobody makes a film about. But this tag did not wait for its release date. 4 months after the shark was tagged, the device washed ashore about 4 kilometers from where the animal was first caught. A man found it on the sand. The team recovered it, plugged it in, and pulled the log. And what they read on that little strip of memory is the reason I am talking to you instead of moving on to an easier story. For most of the record, everything is normal. The shark cruises, it dives, it surfaces, it patrols the cold coastal water that sits somewhere around 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, which is roughly the mid-40s in Fahrenheit. Ordinary behavior for an animal that size. And then, on one specific day, the graph does something violent. In a matter of seconds, the tag plunges from near the surface down to 580 meters. That is more than 1,900 feet, almost straight down, faster than that shark could swim on its own. And at the exact moment of that plunge, the temperature reading jumps. It does not drift. It does not flicker. It leaps from the cold of the open ocean to 25.8 degrees Celsius. That is around 78 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it stays there for days. So here is where I started, as the reluctant skeptic, with the most obvious and most boring explanation available. The tag malfunctioned. Sensors fail. Saltwater gets into electronics. A flooded thermistor can produce garbage numbers, and a weighted device that comes loose will sink like a stone. A sudden drop to depth and a nonsense temperature spike is exactly what you would expect from a dying instrument. I genuinely believed this was the answer. I wanted it to be the answer because the alternative is absurd. But the malfunction theory dies on the details. A flooded sensor gives you noise. It gives you spikes, dropouts, readings that swing wildly and make no biological sense. That is not what this tag recorded. It recorded a stable, consistent, internally logical environment. The temperature did not bounce around. It held at 25.8 degrees with the steadiness of a thermostat. And the depth did not flatline the way a sinking object would. The tag kept moving up and down through the water column, hundreds of meters at a time, in smooth, repeated cycles for days after the temperature changed. A dead tag on the seafloor at 580 meters does not climb back toward the surface and dive again. Something was carrying it. Something that was swimming, diving, and surfacing on a schedule with that tag held at a constant body warm 78 degrees the entire time. That is not a broken instrument. That is the inside of an animal. And the moment I accepted that, I had to confront a number that genuinely frightened me. The water outside was in the mid-40s Fahrenheit. The space the tag was now sealed inside was holding at 78. That is a roughly 30-degree difference maintained continuously in the deep ocean. Whatever ate this shark was carrying enough internal heat to keep its own gut more than 30 degrees warmer than the sea around it at 1,900 feet for the better part of 3 days. The tag had stopped recording the ocean. It had started recording a digestive system. Now, I want you to sit with what that actually means, because this is the point where the people who first studied this tag went very quiet. A 3-meter great white is not prey. In the textbooks, it is the top of the chain. There is nothing above it. The whole reason we fear these animals is that nothing is supposed to eat them. So the recovered tag did not just describe an unusual death. It quietly erased a line we had all drawn around the natural world, and here's the part that started to make me angry rather than just curious. For years, the easiest thing for everyone to do was to file this under anomaly, a one-off, a curiosity not worth chasing. Because the honest version of this story forces an admission that the science establishment really does not like making out loud, which is that there is a predator in our oceans big enough to swallow a great white that we have essentially never observed alive. It was simpler to let the tag gather dust than to explain a monster we could not produce. So if it was not a malfunction, the next reasonable explanation lines up immediately, and it is a good one. A killer whale. This is where most people stop, and honestly, it is a respectable place to stop. Orcas are real. They are massive. They are intelligent, coordinated pack hunters, and we now have hard documented evidence that they kill great white sharks. In recent years off South Africa, 2 orcas nicknamed Port and Starboard have been filmed and confirmed hunting white sharks, tearing them open with surgical precision and stripping out their livers. The sharks fled the region for months afterward. So when I say something ate a great white, your mind correctly goes to the one animal we know does exactly that. For a while, this was my settled answer. Case closed. An orca took it. But the tag refuses to let the orca theory stand, and it refuses for 2 reasons, both of them buried in that same log. The first is the temperature. A killer whale is a mammal. Its core body temperature runs around 36 to 37 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 97 to 99 Fahrenheit, the same warm-blooded range as you and me. If that tag had been swallowed by an orca, the reading should have climbed toward the high 90s. It did not. It settled at 78 Fahrenheit and held there. That is far too cold for a mammal's gut and far too warm for the surrounding sea. It sits in a very specific, very narrow window, and that window does not belong to a whale. The second problem is the diving profile. When the orcas off South Africa take a shark, they tend to feed near the surface. They are air breathers. They cannot stay down indefinitely, but the predator carrying this tag spent days repeatedly descending to great depth and rising again, down into the cold, dark, hundreds of meters at a time, on a cycle, without ever needing to behave like an animal that breathes air. An orca cannot live for 3 days oscillating through 1,900 feet of water without coming up to breathe in a pattern that would show in the data. The descent profile is wrong for a mammal. It is the profile of a fish. So now I had a predator that was cold-blooded, but not as cold as the sea. Warmer than its surroundings, but cooler than a whale, a creature that dives into the deep and stays there, and every time I narrowed it down, the description pointed somewhere I really did not want it to point. Because there is exactly one kind of animal that fits a body temperature in that strange in-between range. Certain large sharks are not fully cold-blooded the way most fish are. Species like the great white and the mako have a trait called regional endothermy. They have a specialized network of blood vessels that traps the heat their muscles generate and keeps their core significantly warmer than the water around them. A big white shark can run its internal temperature 10, 15, even more degrees above the sea, which means the only animal whose gut would naturally sit at around 78 Fahrenheit in mid-40s water while diving repeatedly into the deep for days on end is another, much larger shark. The thing that swallowed the great white was almost certainly a far bigger great white. And before you let yourself off the hook by deciding this was some freak, a 1 in a billion event with no bearing on anything, I want to take that comfort away from you, because that is the exact assumption that kept this case buried. You probably think a story about a deepwater giant off the coast of Australia has nothing to do with your life. Let me close that distance. We map the ocean less thoroughly than we map the surface of Mars. More than 80% of it has never been seen by human eyes at any resolution that matters, The animals we study are the ones that come up where we can reach them, the ones that swim into our nets, our cages, our tagging lines near the coast. An entire category of large predator could spend its life below 500 meters in water we almost never visit, and we would have no idea it existed. We did not find this one by observing it. We found it by accident because it happened to eat an animal we had bolted a recorder to. Think about that. The only reason we know this predator is out there is a fluke of timing. The tag is not evidence of a rare event. The tag is evidence of how blind we actually are. For every monster that swallows a tag shark and accidentally tells on itself, how many do their hunting in total silence, in the dark, where no instrument has ever been? You are not looking at an anomaly. You are looking at the one time the ocean slipped and let us see something it normally keeps hidden, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle a rational person. We like to believe we understand the top of the food chain. We put the great white on documentaries and magazine covers and call it the ultimate predator, the final answer, the thing nothing else can touch. That belief is comfortable. It lets us draw a clean line and feel like the ocean is mapped, ranked, and understood. This tag tells us the line is a fiction. The animal we crowned as the top is, to something else, a meal. And we have never met the thing that crowned itself above it. We just know its stomach runs at 78 degrees and it likes the deep. So I tried the next escape route. Maybe it was not a shark at all. Maybe this was something we genuinely cannot name. A giant squid. An unknown deep-sea creature. The kind of thing that makes for great television but bad science. This is where a filmmaker named Dave Riggs, who was involved with that original tagging work, started asking the question publicly, and the story eventually became a documentary that floated the idea of a colossal, mysterious super predator lurking off Australia. And I will be honest, part of me wanted that, because a true unknown is somehow easier to accept than the truth. A sea monster you have never heard of breaks no rules. It is new, so it owes you no explanation. But the unknown monster theory collapses under the same data that killed everything else. A giant squid is cold. It lives in deep, frigid water and has no mechanism to hold its body at 78 degrees. Swallow a tag, and a squid would give you a reading close to the surrounding sea, not 30 degrees above it. Most deep-sea fish are the same, cold to the touch of any sensor, thermally invisible against the water. The specific, narrow, body-warm temperature on that tag is not the signature of some unidentified abyssal creature. It is the signature of a large, warm-bodied, fast-swimming, regionally endothermic shark. The data does not let us escape into mystery. It keeps dragging us back to the same animal, the same species, just bigger. The horror here is not that it is something we have never imagined. The horror is that it is something we know extremely well, scaled up past the size we believed was possible. And that scaling is where the numbers get genuinely disturbing. And before I go further, I have to be honest with you about something. The cases I keep pulling apart on this channel, this one included, share a common thread: official records that quietly stop, data that gets relabeled, and a size or a depth that the published literature simply refuses to commit to. I spent a long time tracing that pattern across multiple oceans, multiple anomalies, and I put everything I found into a series of books called Forbidden Cartography, Beneath the Veil, and Sealed Depths. Not a summary of what is known, but a detailed reconstruction of what keeps getting filed away before it can become known, including temperature logs, dive profiles, and the institutional decisions that follow them. If this tag already feels like the kind of evidence that should have changed something and somehow did not, those books are where I worked out exactly why. They are in the description if you want to go further than this video takes you. Now, back to the numbers, because the scale of what this tag implies does not stop at one animal on one day. For a great white to swallow a 3-meter shark and carry it whole, with a satellite tag still attached deep into its gut, that predator has to be enormous. We are not talking about a slightly bigger animal. We are talking about a white shark well beyond the largest reliably measured individuals, the kind of size that exists in fishermen's stories and in the fossil record, and almost nowhere in between. The official maximum for the species sits around 6 meters, with a handful of contested claims pushing larger. To do what this animal did, it likely needed to be at the very top of that range or beyond it. The tag was not just describing a predator. It was describing a size class we tell ourselves does not really exist anymore. So let me walk you back through what I tried to do, because I want you to see that I did not come to the frightening answer easily. I started with a broken tag, and the steady temperature and the repeated dives killed that. I moved to a killer whale, and the cold-blooded reading and the deep diving profile killed that. I reached for an unknown monster, and the specific body heat dragged me right back to a known animal. Every reasonable door I opened slammed shut on the same conclusion. A great white shark was hunted, caught, and swallowed whole in the deep water off Western Australia by a vastly larger member of its own kind, which brings me to the single fact that finally ended my skepticism. The thing I went looking for, hoping it would let me out, and instead it locked the door. I went back to the actual recovered data from that pop-up tag, the log that washed ashore those 4 kilometers down the coast, and I focused on the moment of the attack itself, the exact transition in the record, because if you want to understand what really happened, you do not look at the days inside the stomach. You look at the few seconds where the shark went from free to consumed. In that window, the depth reading drops from near the surface down to 580 meters almost instantly, and the temperature makes its leap to 25.8 degrees at the same moment. Read it plainly, and here is what it describes. The tagged shark was near the surface, in cold water, alive. In a matter of seconds, it was 300 fathoms down and sealed inside something running at body heat. There was no struggle recorded across hours. There was no slow decline. There was a single, vertical, catastrophic plunge. The tagged great white did not lose a fight. It was taken from below in one strike and dragged down so fast the instrument barely had time to register the cold water it left behind. The attacker came up out of the deep, hit an apex predator hard enough to swallow it in one motion, and turned for the bottom before the body even registered what had happened. That is the hunting strategy of a great white. Rise unseen from beneath, strike once, overwhelm. We have all seen the footage of a white shark breaching on a seal. Now apply that exact ambush to a target that is itself a 9-foot great white, and make the hunter large enough that the 9-foot shark is the seal. That is what those few seconds in the log describe. And then the part that I still cannot shake. After the strike, the tag does not stop telling the story. For days afterward, it keeps logging that steady 78-degree warmth while the depth rolls up and down through hundreds of meters. The predator simply went back to its life. It hunted, it dove, it patrolled, carrying the slowly dissolving evidence of an apex kill in its stomach, completely indifferent. There was nothing climactic about the days that followed. To the thing that ate it, swallowing a great white was just lunch. The ocean's most feared animal spent its final 3 days as a passenger in the gut of something that did not even change its routine to digest it. Eventually, the tag was expelled, floated up, and drifted to a beach, which is the only reason any of us know this happened at all. That is the fact I could not defeat. Not the size, not the temperature alone, but the shape of those few seconds, the signature of a deliberate ambush from the deep, followed by total indifference. A malfunction has no strategy. A sinking tag does not hunt. The data does not just say something ate a great white. It says something stalked one, struck it from below in the way great whites strike, swallowed it whole, and never broke stride. So here is where I have landed after trying every honest way out. The thing that swallowed that shark was a great white shark. Not a new species, not a monster from a film, not a glitch. Something we have named, studied, filmed, and crowned, grown to a size we insist is a fairy tale, living in water we never visit, doing to the king of the ocean exactly what the king does to a seal. And the only reason we have even one record of it is that it ate the wrong animal on the wrong day and accidentally signed its name in temperature and depth on a device that floated home. I came here to take this story apart. I genuinely believed I would. Instead, every comfortable answer I reached for crumbled in my hands, and what was left standing is worse than the legend I set out to debunk. Because it is real, it is sourced, and it is still out there. Below 500 meters, where we have no eyes, If you are the kind of person who needs the chill and the receipts, who refuses the lazy answer because the lazy answer keeps insulting your intelligence, then you already understand why this one kept me up. So tell me, when you started watching, which explanation were you holding on to? The broken tag, the killer whale, or the unknown monster? Which one did you think would survive? Drop it in the comments and tell me where in the world you are watching from, because I read every one of them. Leave a comment, even if it is one word. This audience does not speak up on its own, and I am telling you directly that I want to hear from you. And if you want to keep testing the official story, instead of swallowing it whole, the way that shark was swallowed, then stay with me, because the next thing I am pulling apart is a recovered deep-sea recording from a different ocean entirely, a sound too large and too low to belong to anything we have ever caught, that the people who logged it quietly relabeled and stopped discussing. I went looking to debunk that one too. I am not doing very well. There is a depth, a date, and a name attached to it that I still cannot explain, and next time I am going to hand all three to you. Before you go, sit for one more second with the thing that did this. It is not a theory. It hunted off a coast where people swim. It rose from the dark, took the animal we call the ultimate predator, and went back to its routine without a pause. We did not discover it through years of careful study. We discovered it because of a tag that should have stayed silent and did not. Every model we have of the ocean's top predator was built on the assumption that nothing eats a great white. That assumption is dead. It died at 580 meters at 25.8 degrees in the few seconds it took for a king to become a meal. And the animal that proved it is still down there, still warm, still hunting in the 80% of the planet we have never seen. I wanted to tell you it was a glitch. I checked. It was not. That is the part I cannot give back to you. And honestly, it is the part I cannot give back to myself either. So let me leave you with the question I keep circling back to, the one that turns this from a curiosity into something colder. If a great white can grow to a size we swear is impossible and live its whole life below the depth we routinely reach, then the number we print as the maximum is not a fact. It is just the largest one, careless enough to come up where we could measure it. The real ceiling is unknown because we have never met the animals that stay down. The 6-meter limit is not the top of the species. It is the top of our reach. And that gap between what the ocean contains and what we are able to see is the most honest measurement on that entire tag. Everything else describes one shark on one day off one coast. That gap describes all of it everywhere right now. I checked it from every angle I could find. It only ever got wider. That is where I have to leave you, standing at the edge of the part we cannot measure, knowing something measured us first. That's where the data left off tonight, but the story doesn't. Inside the circle, I take you past this point and unmask that predator fully. It's the deeper version of this exact video. And in there you can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself, a real person, not a machine. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click. I'm glad you're here. If mysteries like this one keep you wondering, stay with me. Subscribe and explore more videos right here because there's plenty more strange and unsettling discoveries waiting for you on this channel.